Okay, so I'm back to hanging out at my brother's house with my nieces. The other one, I think, went back. Yeah, there. Have a chair this time, since the house is staged for having people come through it. Although I don't think anybody, they have somebody interested in buying it, so I don't think they really need this at this point. And my brother said they shouldn't have anybody needing to do a walkthrough or check anything out at this point in time since they're gone. But we'll see. And in the meantime, I'm just hanging out in this room on this chair with this thing staring at me. We walked, and they like it when I am on dog sitting duty because it means they get lots of walks, at least once a day. So they don't always get that otherwise, but they're big fans. So we discovered today that India she won't drink water, like just regular house water, when we go on our walks, which is like kind of concerning because she's a big dog and I like to have water available for them when we get back to the car after we walk. But every time we've done it so far, she won't drink it. Today I didn't have the bottle of water I use for the dogs. Yesterday I brought that thing over here and used their water, thinking that maybe it was a well versus city water thing, for why she wouldn't drink the water, and she still didn't drink it. Today I discovered she will drink ice water, and it doesn't matter if it's well water or city water. It just has to have ice in it. So, new discovery. And they both drink a lot, so we just need ice cubes in it. So that's the secret, I guess. Yesterday I had a really good day. Started off really good. The hound is trying to stir up trouble, so was in a good mood all day, right? And then I saw that I had a thing or an alert on YouTube, and I looked at it, and it was kind of, I mean, it wasn't a horribly offensive remark or anything, but it was enough to sting. And immediately I just deleted it. It's like, fuck this. I'm back to the point of, if it's not helping, it's just not necessary to have it there, then we're just going to get rid of it and move along, rather than allow it to be something that we have to come back to and it's still posted somewhere. So I deleted it and tried to, you're digging your nails in, dude, stop that. And tried to get myself back in the good space that I had been in earlier, right? And I had this vision, as I made this decision to, go back to music that was more uplifting for me and not linger on the negative. I had this vision where, like, because I chose to do something for myself and deleting it rather than just leaving it for people future reference or whatever, basically I just saw like the soul group stepping up around me, right? So like not doing anything in particular, just stepping up into place to support me in whatever I'm doing, right? So I just have a lot of these weird visions that pop in these days, and it's like at an energetic level because I chose to do something differently than I would have done in the past, because, old me totally would have just shut down and, maybe even revisited the idea of this is stupid, why am I doing this at all, and thought about deleting the whole thing again. But it's like that's not even an option anymore. So because it's not an option anymore, because I'm still choosing to move forward, it's like at an energetic level, I feel the soul group stepping in as though ready to step into my aid if need be, kind of a thing, which, I mean, still a weird thing since I haven't really met any of them in person at this point in time. And any communication I've had with any of them's been like social media based exclusively and nothing deep by any means, right? Because I feel like, a big part of that's why the mental health thing has been something that I've had to go back and forth with throughout my entire life, because I have these visions that pop into my head, and you try talking about those to anybody else and it's like, yeah, okay, crazy. So since obviously mental health issues have run in my family, I've talked about that a bunch. That was something, I guess, that kept me from talking about visions or anything before. But I feel like as I'm purging out some of this negative bullshit from my system that's just kind of stuck and I've carried with me, even though I didn't really know it was a thing I had the choice not to carry with me. It's like now that I'm able to release some of that and choose to not be so heavily affected by it, right? So I've talked about how, my Cancer placements, especially those in the 12th house, which is most of them, Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Mars. The rising sign is the lone Cancer sign in the first house, and all the rest of them are in the 12th house. But it's like, I've always had this tendency to, like even in my dreams, hide in the bathroom, right? And I knew, I wouldn't have called it hiding in high school or middle school or whenever, but it's like when I was growing up, it's like when there was too much, when I felt like I was being noticed too much by the people around me, the easiest thing to do was to, disconnect from the environment and go somewhere where there wasn't a whole lot of people, right? So go hide out in the bathroom stall for the majority of the passing period until, I leave myself enough time to do what I need to do as far as, do I need to go to my locker, and am I going to go to the bathroom closest to the class I just came out of or closest to the class I'm getting ready to go into? And, of course, there's different factors that were kind of driving those decisions back then. Like, if I actually had to pee, the biggest thing was just to duck out away from people and not be there for anybody to notice me, basically. It's that I've talked about the visions I've had with, for this expanding process, and how, like the one time I was watching this music video on YouTube on repeat, and it was this weird experience because I wasn't focused on watching the video. I just kept hitting play, and I was putting clothes away, and I've flashed to this space in my head where I was yelling at my mom and my grandma for just because you chose to stay in a toxic marriage, you didn't stay because of love. You stayed because you were afraid that there was nothing better out there or whatever. And just this kind of moment of speaking truth that I always felt I was safest it was safest to choke on, right? So rather than saying the things to piss off the family, you know, it goes with that fear of using the voice thing. It's like there's a reason why it took me so long to be able to actually start doing the thing. And it was largely because there was so much wounding in early childhood around it. And for the sake of, especially for my narcissistic grandfather and mother, using me as the scapegoat to keep me in line and, use guilt and shame to make sure that I didn't ruin their illusion of a happy family that they got to portray to the world. Right? Because I couldn't really cooperate with that one so much. The biggest thing is like, I just see myself as this little kid, and it's like, not that I was trying to make anybody look bad. I just was like, had questions because they were saying one thing, but then completely living another way, so that like they wanted the illusion of the big happy family, but yet in reality, everybody was completely miserable. So that wasn't something we dealt with. And so their way of dealing with it for me was to squash me down so I was unable to speak to anybody, and like terrified to speak up about anything. So then when I'm, watching this or have this music video playing, and I find myself saying the things I wasn't able to say to my grandmother and my mother, after my grandfather's death, it's like, it was just this weird kind of experience where one minute I'm going off on them, the next minute I have this flash where I'm like in this other space, and like in this space with these guys the day they're like making this music video. And it's like I'm supposed to be there, but yet at the same time I get really overwhelmed and need to, basically go shrink down in front of this little half wall thing. And the vision that I saw of it was like, I'm there and I have a hoodie on, because that's pretty standard for if it's chilly at all, I usually have a hoodie, and sometimes even if it's not, but it's like just for the sake of, well, protective layers basically. But anyway, I see myself in this space with these guys doing this music video, and they're clearly having fun, and then I get to a point where it's like I go and like kind of crouch down in front of the wall, and I find myself telling them something to the effect of, okay, the idea of it was that I felt exposed, right? And just like this major sense of exposure and not feeling safe, but not because the space that I was in wasn't safe, just because I felt exposed, right? And what I realized as I was journaling about that, because of course, going back to the whole crab thing, my focus when I was writing about it was, how awkward hermit crabs are when they are going between shells because, it's time for a bigger one, right? But the focus was the exposure and the awkward little crabby ass and all that stuff. But then as, that my intuitive voice spoke up and was like, but they have to go, or they have to be exposed for that short span of time because they've outgrown the other shell. It's like, so it's a matter of you've outgrown this space and you're feeling exposed because it's time to get ready to step into the space that is, more able to, to handle, you know, what I'm becoming, I guess, and like the energetic growth, and you know, I keep seeing all these things happen in visions and whatnot, and it's like it's very much there's a physical component to it because obviously I'm here in this space and doing things that I wouldn't have otherwise, because like this whole YouTube thing has been that completely. You know, like the main purpose of it was because it was time to start using my voice in some way or another, right? So, so I start the channel, you know, and of course, the biggest motivating factor on starting the channel was that twin flame connection and realizing that he had to be in the spotlight so I could find him, but how would he ever be able to find me if I wasn't doing something more than I'd ever done? Which was basically just hiding away in this little shell of an existence. This thing will not leave me alone right now. So she keeps like bumping my arm when I'm trying to hold the camera. So yeah. But it's like my little shell of existence. Like, it's okay for me to exist in the room that I have at my parents' house, right? But then, as you know, I've talked a lot about how as I've started cleaning up my stuff, I feel like their stuff starts creeping into my space more, or like trying to take over, you know, like where I've cleared out space, they're coming back to try to pull me back into the bullshit. So I can't expand beyond what I've believed myself to be capable of earlier on. So it's just kind of this weird thing where it's like all this stuff, you know, there's of course the physical component to it, but then at the same time, most of what's happening is, damn it, stop scratching me, is more at an energetic level. And so I see all these like visions and things of what's going on for me. And, you know, that's how I'm learning what I'm actually doing, like the growth, you know, and being exposed. But that's part of the process from leaving the shell that you've outgrown to stepping into the shell that is more suitable for holding you, I guess. Yeah. I'm gonna do this whole video holding this dog's foot. Yeah. Will you stop, please? She's gonna drive me nuts. Anyway, yeah, so it's just kind of an interesting, I guess, feeling. Like, I know that I've been talking a lot recently about finally being at a point where I feel ready to start growing my channel and stepping more into like my actual purpose and whatnot. But then, you know, of course, that's going to bring with it more of the shitty remarks and like the people who basically come out of the woodwork to throw out the how dare you try to grow and be more than we've been led to believe we're able to be. It's like, how dare you try to be something more? How dare you try to do something more? Will you stop, man? We're on this side now. Hold on. Okay, so I threw them outside, and now I forget where I was at. Something about, oh, yeah, those people that like come out of the woodwork to basically try to knock you back down into your place, because how dare you try to be something more than what we're than anybody else, right? So it's like at an energetic level, people want to somehow believe we're supposed to be this little tiny incapable thing, and we need something outside of us to I don't know. To lead us, to rule over us, kind of a thing. Which basically, like, if you look at the way of the country, especially, there's clearly an abundance of people that want to be ruled over by somebody else, but it's like that's not what we're here to do. But the system has made it so we believe that that's, we're supposed to be ruled over. So it prevents us from being able to step into higher ways of being and doing more for ourselves, right? And being more in this space and actually coming together with others to better things for the whole, and not just accept that we're forever doomed to be ruled over by fucking assholes that shouldn't be there. But even that, it's like, in a healthy system, wouldn't be there, but because it's not a healthy system, should on that end, because it's the live demonstration of how bad things can get if you are, if you're not willing to have some sort of autonomy. If you just go along with what everybody else wants to believe you have to because of our little piddly existence here. I don't know. Anyway, like the one comment, like, it was basically just mocking me for talking a lot and not saying necessarily anything of substance. But, like, even that, it's like, I've known and have commented many times that that is part of my process, because if you cannot sit through the painfully boring parts up front, then you don't have business accessing me at the later versions, once I finally start coming around and opening up about stuff that I feel more passionate about or that I believe in more. So it's like, yeah, honestly, the way I start my videos, it's not to bring people in. It's not. I've never cared about having this big, amazing thing that really draws people in. That's not my thing, because for me, it takes me a while to warm up and to figure out whatever I'm trying to talk about any given time. So I want the people that don't, that find that boring, I want them to go away, right? Because they're maybe slightly less likely to stick around and, say things based on what I actually said. So, I mean, yeah, like, to an extent, okay, a lot of my videos start out with bullshit with my family, and, just drama there. So anybody that would be inclined to stick around is probably more likely somebody that's going to get that kind of, or understand it, right, and where I'm coming from, for having put it out there. It's one of those things, it's kind of frustrating, because it's like, so much of what I've talked about on my channel has been dealing with the narcissistic family abuse and trying to come out of that and be able to have a life that I would want to have, right? That try to create something that I was led to believe I was incapable of having or creating before, because my family didn't want me to, I very much was not raised to, I was raised to pour everything out into the good of the family and to not give a shit about myself. I wasn't supposed to have my own life. I was supposed to exist so the older generations could piss all over me and my existence, as the older generations before them had basically pissed all over their lives and possibility of having a life, right? And that's just the cycle. That's how it's supposed to go. They were miserable. They came from miserable people. I was only ever supposed to stay in that misery, but I don't want to. That it's like, what's the point of having an existence if all you want to do is be miserable? And talked about my family going out of their way just to say the mean thing all the time. Like, my mom is the type of person that when I was walking down the hallway to go to my room, just wanting to be left alone, and then she was in her room across the hall, she would always stop me to have me come in there so she could say something like, "You're a very pretty girl, but you don't act like it." It's like, you don't have to say anything to me. Why do you have to always go negative, right? But that's like basically the way the entire world does. Because, there are exceptions because there have to be. But by and large, it's like most people, the majority rule kind of on the negative spectrum. And that's why we're seeing things so kind of horrendous at a national level, is because there's so much at the family level where we've been taught to be miserable and we're supposed to be miserable, so we don't get out of line and try to create something that is not miserable for everybody, right? I know in my last video I talked about Dolores Cannon, her book. She's got the book about the 3 waves of volunteers in the New Earth. And the last time I kind of mentioned like the beacons, which is like the Metallica types, Keanu Reeves, those are ones that I can think of for me that I've looked up to along the way, not because they have had easy lives or anything, but because they did what they set out to do in spite of whatever negativity they probably faced from the world. And, it's like the first round of volunteers, if you will, it was specifically the beacons, those that show the rest of us that it's possible, right? And then there's like, dog's wanting, hold on. We're back. But yeah, like the next wave would be like, my channel's been devoted to basically is just like those of us who are here to basically absorb the density of the world and transmute it into something else. So we need the beacons so we can see that there are people that have done this and are able to stand in their own light and be true to who they are, and come from a place of authenticity, because we're taking on all this density to be transmuted into something else, right? So, I mentioned I mentioned the other day, I'm gonna keep moving because she sat down. She's just like panting on my arm. And then that thing's doing that. So yeah, I've talked about how before I left my ex the last time. It's like I was thinking about how miserable I was in that space and how it was not my home, and I knew it was not my home. And, I spent my whole life feeling like I was never at home anywhere. And, there was something that came up in the news with, like, some good thing Keanu had done with renting, like, a van or whatever to help other people who, like, their flight got canceled or whatever happened with that. And, thinking he could rent a car to get back, and then was like, well, there's still all these people that would be stuck without, so he rented a bus or a van or whatever for the group of them to go, right? So then it like has all these people coming out of the woodwork talking about things he did in times that like they've met him. Like I heard stories about people he still gets together to play hockey with, street hockey. Just like random things that, of people that he has connected with throughout whatever time frame in his lifetime, whatever. Like there were just a bunch of stories that like were everywhere for a while. And as I was, sitting in this place of being miserable and knowing that I was miserable where I was at and that I didn't belong there, I had the sense of, if there is one, there are more. Those are your people. Find them. So then it's like, it kind of made it so it's like, well, I have to leave the icky situation that's literally trying to kill me at this point. But but it served as that light. It's like there's this beacon of light. There are people out there. Find them. There are others, right? So this is a whole wave of emotion right there. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, so obviously I left that situation, and that wasn't the only thing that happened. That was just one of several things that added together as a means of, get your ass up out of this place. This is not where you belong. You belong somewhere else. This. Go somewhere else, right? And so it came through like that with the stories, and of course he was everywhere for a while after that. And I want to say, I don't know, was it February or March 2019 when that whole thing happened? Because it was March when I left my ex the last time for good. But like even then, I've talked about how, okay, like my ex made a habit of, like, at least there at the end, making comments like, should have raped you when I had the chance, kind of a thing. And I always hated it. And that was the biggest thing, was he knew, and I knew he was just trying to get a reaction out of me, was the biggest thing. So I blew it off to an extent, but it still infuriated me. But then it got to a point where when he finally knew that I was leaving, I made the comment that I just needed to get laid and then I would stick around. And then he tried to force himself on me, and I shoved him. And when I did, the three dogs like jumped in, and like, Gidget was laying across my chest, Taz was standing over my waist, and Ziva was standing over my feet. And like Ziva and Taz were just snarling at him and snapping. And I saw him kind of like smacking around at Ziva, which she was the one that we had with us the longest. We got her in 2013 after we got married at the end of 2012. And she hated him the whole time. But since that's where we were, there were times she would have to be around him, like when I had a guard weekend. It's like I always hated leaving her behind because I knew she hated him, but at the same time, I didn't know what he was doing. I figured if I wasn't there, he might be slightly less antagonizing of her, because I always thought that most of what he was doing was specifically to get a reaction out of me because the dog loved me better, basically. But then, you know, like after that incident where like I shoved him back and the dogs were like jumped into my aid, and it's like that voice came back and it's like, they're doing your job of protecting you. Now it is your job to protect them. It is time to go. And, you know, like I watched him when he got up, he went down to where Ziva was at and was swatting at her, trying to get her to bite him. So it's like, yeah. I think I wanted to say that was like the last week, but it was definitely in the final stages of leaving and everything, you know. But then when I came back, it was a matter of just this immense depression of how did I even allow myself to get into that situation to begin with, you know, which came back to the family stuff that I've been sorting through here in this space. You know, it's like the whole twin flame thing was specifically the thing to make me choose to do things, right? So I mean, not before I committed my love and career lives over to the universe to lead. But then once I realized who he was and who he was to me, and then started seeing like all these, like all the ways like his name and initials and birth date has been around me my entire life. You know, it's like it's always been dancing around in the periphery, just out of reach. So I wasn't aware of it until the right pieces of information came together, right? So it's like only after I committed my love and career to the universe did it come to mind that, hey, this has literally been around you forever. I mean, like the name I knew, because I remember thinking in undergrad, there was a girl in a Bible study that I was part of that was married to a guy named Rick, and every time she would talk about her Marine husband, Rick, it's like whenever she said his name, it was like, I got this overwhelming swoony feeling. It's like, what the hell is that all about? Right? But then like also seeing like all these ways was like, okay, the first serious boyfriend that I had, his little brother was named Richard. And I remember thinking about Richard, that seems like an awfully grown up name for this little kid not having any nicknames. You know, it was like the universe was just putting these little pins and all these little things throughout my life until the right details came together. And then it's like, oh, now I can see like all these different things, right? So, you know, like I was always big into I Love Lucy and, you know, spent a lot of time watching that because it was one of those safe shows that little kids can watch when, you know, that's what your parents grew up on or whatever. So, of course, Ricky Ricardo and Little Ricky. You know, but then, like, the people in undergrad, and then, you know, because there was also, okay, the first serious boyfriend, when we broke up, we were going to the same university, right? So, we were both at Ball State, and he ended up being practically in a relationship before I could like commit to ending it, and it was mainly because it couldn't be easy for me to go back to it in a moment of panic because, you know, like I tried breaking up with him 3 times in high school because I knew he wasn't ultimately what I was looking for, like for like the person I saw myself with. It's like there were overlapping things, but I knew it wasn't him. So it's like I tried to break up with it, but then at the same time, you know, like, okay, at one point, I think the longest breakup we had before the last one was a month, and his little sister ended up being in my section for marching band that year, and I was like, it's going to be easier for me and my sanity if me and him are still in a relationship and she's not like out to like make me have a miserable year, right? So basically the reason we got back together the last time was to bring me peace for that situation, because I knew she was going to try to make my life a living hell otherwise. Which is really aggravating because she like played clarinet before. It's like, go back to fucking clarinet. Why are you in pit now? You know, and it's just like, for storytelling purposes later, apparently. But yeah, like, okay, anyway. When we finally broke up for good, it was my sophomore year at Ball State and his freshman year. And he was basically already kind of involved with this girl that was in my fucking dorm, man. Not just my dorm, the same hall. She was on the 3rd floor, I was on the 1st. It's like, so it's just kind of like aggravating on that end. But she had a brother, same name, right? And, you know, even freaking... Okay, I've talked a lot about helping my ex with his custody case. And no, my ex was not a good father and needed to have custody of the kid. But his family seemed like a little, well, I mean, I guess depending on which ones, seemed like the best shot for the kid to have a better chance when his mom, you know, kept, you know, she was trying to tell lies about the family, his dad's side of the family. And every time a school therapist, doctor's office started catching on that she was making stuff up, she would jerk them out of that place and go to another one to start all over with, you know, the same story and trying to prove that this is what's going on when obviously it wasn't what was going on. But it's like, in that situation for me, the best thing I felt like I could do, because of course I got in there because I had lost myself with my military training and was trying to make sense of, you know, what I realized I was capable of by having survived basic training in AIT and all that stuff, and then moving back home and trying to make sense of what I learned to be true of myself, and that I'm a lot stronger and more capable of things than I realized, but then back in this environment that very much didn't want me to be capable of better things, or expanding to something else. You know, I was supposed to be there so the family could suck the life out of me. Yeah. Anyway. So, how did I get there? The undergrad thing that started that path. And the guy that I had dated before. Oh, the custody thing, right. So when I was going through all the custody paperwork for trying to organize the thing, and the biggest thing that I saw, or the biggest thing I think I was there to do, was to help my former brother-in-law clear his name for the shit that got dumped on him because his brother was an asshole. So I was there, you know, I later realized I was there for his brother and his son more than anything, because he treated me like shit, but he also was, you know, trying to set them up, you know, trying to set his son up for failure. You know, like when I came into the picture, he and his parents were, you know, they'd give the kid who was 3 when I met him, you know, they'd load him up on sugar and caffeine and then send him home. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're literally setting him up to get in trouble in this other space, because you know his mom's going to be pissed when he gets there and he's all off the wall, and you think it's all cute and funny because he's not your problem now, you know. But that's like, they were going back and forth, and she'd do the same shit. So, you know, to make it so it was harder on his dad, it's like, that's not fair to the kid who's getting in trouble in both spaces because he's acting up, because the parent set him up for failure with the other parent. It's like, that's shit. But yeah, it was like, I realized later I was there for those two, right? So the point of that story was, in all the custody case or paperwork that I was dealing with, and trying to organize the argument so they could put it in front of the judge very clearly what was going on, making timelines and having like everything, like a rock solid argument behind it. That name was still there because his older brother, the kid's older brother, his half brother, was named Richard. And my ex-father-in-law always made a big joke about how, she named the kids after the parent, except for in the middle son's case because, because she cheated on my now ex at that point in time. And so when she was first pregnant, she didn't know if it was his or the other guy's, right? And when she tried to pull him into it, supposedly there was something where she waited until like the last possible time to prove it. And by that time, the other guy was out of the picture, I think. But yeah, there's a big joke to my ex-father-in-law that, she always named the kids after their fathers, so she remembered whose they went to, right? There were 3 kids. The oldest was named after his dad, and the youngest was named after his dad. And what was that? Oh, Mom's sending me shit. I don't care. Yeah. Hi. The other one's probably out on the couch now. Anyway, so how did I get there? In the healing process, after dealing with all the toxic bullshit with my ex, and then trying to sort how I got into that situation, it went back to my family, right? Which, of course, I didn't really come to terms with until this whole twin flame thing came up more. And that was to the extent of I encountered his energy on social media, and I happened to do a live stream, and I commented on something. There were 2 times. The first one, I just had like a general comment about the space that I was in, and like it was just kind of nobody saw it, I don't think. The next time, I happened into it right before he was closing it out, and I said something about damn late to the party or something, and what am I going to do to procrastinate on writing now? And he responded, and it was like, it just felt like one of those things of, oh shit, I've been caught, right? So I was like, but then like what happened was, it's like I got this really strong sense of feeling unsafe in my own body. And being aware, and I didn't know the 2 were connected, that that information's come later. But yeah, like just really feeling unsafe in my own body. And then it's like, okay, well, now that I'm aware of this, how do I fix that, right? So, and it's come through this whole processing thing, of course, turning my life or love and career lives over to the universe to lead. And then, it's brought to my attention that this particular person is the twin flame. And, like the way it came up was, came up because he had posted a little short clip of a song of his that he was singing, and on Instagram, and I was like, is this a new one? Because I don't remember that from when I discovered this other band that he's in before. And so I looked it up, and it's like, no, it's not a new song. It was one that was on like a bunch of my playlists, but I hadn't heard it in a while, and I hadn't really thought anything of it. It was because it wasn't at the right time. Like once I, came back to it, and with the sense of, see, it was actually, I started listening to the song, and it's just like, I got sucked into it, and it's just like, it feels like this means there's somebody out there that gets what I'm feeling, right? And it's just like, so I just kept listening to the song over and over again, and that little intuitive voice chimed in with, "That's him. That's the one you've been looking for." It's like, what? And my initial reaction was, yeah, right. He's out of my league, right? So then this whole thing comes up. Okay. After I make the comment about, yeah, right, he's out of my league, because this is a conversation in my head, the response was, are you going to let us do it, or are you going to do it your way again? Because that's worked so well in the past. It's like, what do I have to lose, right? So then it comes up with the whole, I start the YouTube thing because he had to be in a spotlight for me to find him, but then how was he ever going to be able to find me, right? So then I start doing this YouTube thing, and what ends up happening is it becomes this space of talk therapy for dealing with all this, unpacking all this family trauma baggage that I've been carrying my whole life, and it's just, I don't know. So I started it in November 2023, and now we are in June 2025. So I've been doing this about a year and a half, and I've said many times, like the first year I was not trying to grow it at all, and even then it's like, after that, it wasn't that I was trying to grow it, it was that I was more open to the possibility of it growing, right? So like the first 3 subscribers that I had when I was like starting out and like doing these little short videos, like I'd stop and when I was skating and maybe talk for like a half hour and then go back to skating. It's like I would skate, and then I feel like, or I'd hit a point where it's like I feel like I'm supposed to do a video. So then I'd go find this rock and I'd talk for a little bit and then go back to skating and try to forget about it, right? And, focus on other things. And then, so I got the first 3 subscribers in that time, and I cried because I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do the thing that I knew I was supposed to do, or I feel like I've had visions of things in the past that I'm kind of moving toward, and it's just one of those things. It's like you don't go from hiding out in bathrooms to avoid having too many people notice you there in that space to the level that I feel like I'm eventually supposed to be at without baby steps. Lots of baby steps. And, first 3, I cried because I was so afraid that I was going to fail, right? And it's like whatever I'm doing, it's like I didn't even know exactly what I was doing. It just felt like I was supposed to start talking to my camera and then post it for whoever to find, right? And I did that for like a month and a half of like, I would do 1, maybe 2 or 3 a week. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was what I could do at the time. And when I felt led to do one, then I would go do it. But then when I had to take time away from it to recover, because I expanded so far beyond what I thought I was capable of, it's like I deleted everything because I was afraid of it still being there for anybody else to find while I wasn't doing anything with it. It's like I knew the first videos, they weren't good, but it was still the starting point. And in hindsight, I wish I would have left them there, but I didn't because I was afraid of, anybody coming around and, like anything, just that the version of me from November 2023, come January of 2024, it's like, what would, if somebody came across that and that was the extent of where it was and where it went. I was afraid of it still being there for anybody to pay attention to. But then when I finally started back up in March 2024, after feeling all throughout February like I was supposed to, then I get to, I ended up reposting them. But then, of course, it's awkward because I'm not going back to the pictures that I had, because I've always put my face. And I feel like a big part of that, it was just, I gotta have a thumbnail. I didn't know what that. I feel like if it's just a picture of me, then maybe people will figure out that I'm just talking about whatever. So a lot of people, that could be enough to say, no, I'm not interested in that, right? So that was kind of where I rolled with it at that point. But when I came back and posted them again, then it was awkward having to post. I think I used like random pictures of other things. One was like this picture that I sketched out real quick, and it wasn't anything fancy, doesn't look good even. It's just like becoming. And, it's just that. And it was just something to smack it up there with a picture of something because I didn't have the same pictures that I had used the first time around, right? I mean, I think I did for at least one of them, but I didn't want to use it at that point because then it's like, no, well, I've taken better pictures since then, but then the pictures I took back then were really shitty. And it's really just awkward trying to take pictures before I do the videos anyway. I just feel like I'm awkward in pictures anyway. That's why usually my little friend will be in them with me. One of the friends, whether it's these two or one of mine, or others. There have been others. But yeah, like the first three, I cried. I think 4 through 6 were less traumatic, but it was still like, oh, what are we doing? What are we doing? And then through 12, it's like, okay, cool, glad you're here. But then I got to a point where, okay, like I got to 12 the first year, right? So November 11th, 2023 to November 11th, 2024. I was at 12 subscribers because I wasn't trying to grow it because this has been basically me telling stories and heavy stories that I've cried through so many of the videos. Will you stop digging the floor, dude? Because it's heavy shit. It's unpacking the baggage I've been carrying my whole life and didn't even realize that I had been carrying like I had been, and it's, I was thinking like the start. Okay, so I watched a lot of these narcissistic family things, and of course I've talked many times about being the scapegoat for my family, right? Even then, it's like I didn't really fully come to terms with that, even though like I always kind of knew that was my role, and like I was definitely the black sheep of the family. But it's like it took starting to unpack the stories before I really realized how deep that went, and how deeply traumatic it was even. Yeah. I don't know what she did, but she's back to do that. Anyway, I commented on the Jerry Wise videos that I watched earlier. I don't even remember which one it was. A little short one from recent, talking about what happens when the narcissistic family loses its scapegoat. I think was one of them, and I don't remember what the other one was. But it's like actually commenting in those spaces. It's kind of a weird experience too. Because it's like I'm finally owning the fact that this has been my experience, and now realizing that it's not a healthy experience, but it's still the experience that I have, and trying to shift into something else, a new way of existing, trying to create something else for myself, even though, like that's so much the baggage that I've been lugging around forever. The one that I was trying to comment on earlier, it's like, I still cannot say for sure that I want to be convinced that my dad is a narcissist. He's definitely a toxic misogynist and has been like the main flying monkey for my mother. But is his a narcissism thing? I'm torn. Because there are certain things where it's like, he's where a lot of my issues stemmed from. But I wasn't able to really realize some of those until I started like unpacking stuff later, right? I realized when I was doing my earliest videos, it seemed like a lot of stuff went back to my dad. And it's like, I don't know if it's because he's one of the narcissistic elements, or he's just like so deep in agreement, energetic agreement to the toxic existence and keeping my grandfather's illusion alive, even now that my grandfather's dead. Now okay, so my grandmother was the main energetic agreement piece for my grandfather, and she was extremely toxic too. She's kind of like my dad. It's like, are they narcissistic? Or are they just extremely toxic? And like the big thing that's been a struggle with, okay, when I stopped really having anything to do with my grandmother was when I was taking her and my aunt to visit my grandfather in the hospital in August after he shattered his femur and was in there and had to have surgery on his femur, and was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was the one taking them back and forth. My mom, of course, was living in the hospital with her daddy. My grandmother one day used me as an excuse for why we were going to leave when we did, which was basically she didn't want to be there anymore. And rather than it being her idea that she didn't want to be there anymore because he was going to make her feel bad about it, and so was my mom, she put it on me, so she was doing me some kind of favor, right? But then when she decides she wants to go to lunch, right? So fine. And while we're in the car, we go past this neighborhood of this kid that my mom used to babysit. And he was the end of her babysitting career, right? So she had this in-home daycare for all of my early life, right? Like, I think that fell through, I want to say middle school? Maybe elementary? I don't really remember. Okay, so my mom used to she'd just go into like these blind rages and just like beat on me and my brother. And my brother said at one point this kid's mom had to talk her down or when she was doing that to my brother, and then one day my mom does it to her son, and that was the end of the babysitting job, right? There was a whole ordeal. I don't really remember all that happened with it, but it was the end of my mom's babysitting thing. When we drove past this neighborhood of the kid, my grandmother says to me, I don't know how she didn't get arrested or something like that. And it was just like, to me, the way it hit me when she said it was, she knew there was a problem and chose not to do anything about it. And she knew it was bad enough that she was surprised that my mom hadn't gotten arrested, but she she chose not to do anything. So it's like she just left me and my brother to fend for ourselves in whatever chaos my mom was doing. And since that, it felt like the first line of complacency. It's like I haven't wanted anything to do with her since. It took a while before I really stopped talking to her altogether. And I don't think, let me correct that. I don't think it was that it took a while for me to stop talking to her. I think it took a while before anybody noticed that I wasn't talking to her. Because that came up when my grandfather was in the hospital. Of course, my grandfather was all about making everything about him. And so when I'm taking my aunt and my grandma to see him wherever, or, he went to the rehab hospital after that, then he went to the rehab hospital at the nursing home. In that time, I was still going a lot of times. In August, I did hit the point with my grandfather after he got moved to, the first rehab hospital, like the actual rehab hospital, not just the rehab place at the nursing home. I had this morning, I woke up and was crying and had this argument with him in my head. It's like, I have wasted 33 years of my life mourning your death and you're not dead yet. I will not mourn it any longer. So that I stopped being as available, but I was still popping in from time to time. And it got to a point where I wasn't looking at him even. And would barely say anything to him, barely say anything to anybody other than my mom and her sisters. Basically barely say anything to my grandparents. But while my grandfather was there running his mouth, he didn't leave time for anybody else to realize that I'd stopped talking, right? So only after his death did they start figuring out that I'm not paying attention. So now when anything happens with my grandma, I'm not in the middle of it. It's like I want no part of it. Like currently she is in the nursing home and she's been there for a week or two, and I have not been there once to visit her. I have not talked to her in quite a while. I was in the same room with her very briefly on Father's Day, because of course she was at my aunt's house for that get together. And the point of that was my mom and her sisters wanted their little pineapple shirts that they had matching their daddy, because everybody at the nursing home liked that shirt, and it was a big thing. So then it was their time to remember the good times with daddy, basically. It's like gross. Because he's a fucking monster. Fuck that dude. Yeah. But when I was there, it's like I didn't really even look at my grandma. When I put my stuff down by this chair that my dad happened to be sitting in, which there too, somebody else I don't really talk to unless I absolutely have to. I put my shoes under this little step stool thing that was behind the chair and put my bag back there. And then I walked in front of the TV and past my grandma to go, actually, I think I went to the bathroom or something. But it's like I didn't look at her. And she kind of, it's like she was trying to. And it's like, I feel like, okay, I've mentioned on here several times that if I am around my grandmother at all, it is guaranteed she's going to be falling in the near future, and I'm expected to go over there and help. If I'm completely disconnected from it, she might still fall, but now it's not them relying on me to have to get pulled into the drama. They're realizing that I'm probably not a real helpful element on that anymore, and they'll have to figure it out. One day, my aunt called when I was taking my mom to Greenfield for something, and basically I had to go to Greenfield, and my mother was just trying to jump on the trip to try to make me talk to her. And when we were in the car, her friend calls, and then, like her sister, the middle sister, was texting her, and, they had gone over to check on grandma, and grandma had fallen and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I knew my mom was trying to want to go back there to deal with it and whatnot. And I just said, if it's that bad, call the fire department, because that's literally part of what they do. If you have somebody that is mostly independent and can live at home, but happen to fall, you can call them and they will help. And it's like, it was kind of this thing for a while. It was like, or are you going to make me take you back over there now? It's like, because if I take you back over there, you're just not going with me. And she didn't want to do that, and of course her friend, who kind of knows parts of what's going on, confirmed that yes, they do that. And we did not end up going back. And I think the bigger deal that day was it meant that my uncle was going to have to help take my grandma to the bathroom or whatever. It's like, don't know what to tell you. Sorry. And yeah, this would be a lot easier if you weren't pestering me every little bit. It's just like, you're here, just talk to me. Forget what you're doing. I think she doesn't like it when people get this animated also, or are talking about aggravating things. She gets kind of wound up. Should be a good service dog, which is kind of part of the purpose, but she's never been trained for it. But she is a doodle. Yeah. Yeah, but like my grandma's been at the nursing home, and it's like I haven't gone. And I keep hearing, specifically from my mom, where my grandma's like, what did I do to Sarah? She won't talk to me or anything. I don't know what I did to make her mad. It's like, well, first off, that confirmation point where you admitted that you knew there was a problem and chose not to do anything about it, even though she didn't say as much, it was still just the fact that she could say it enough that she was surprised my mom didn't get arrested for child abuse. It's like, okay. But then the other piece of that was when my grandfather finally did kick the bucket. When my brother and his wife and daughter went over there to spend some time with my grandmother, she was a bitch. It's just very much pulling out that passive-aggressive bullshit, right? So she says, sorry I didn't go to Gracie's recital. It was Donnie and my anniversary, and he's more important. It's like, first off, dude's dead. Second off, anniversary's in April, not December, when he died in December. And thirdly, she wasn't invited to the dance recital because nobody figured she'd go anyway, right? Because she has difficulty with staying upright. So it's just more trouble than it's worth. So let's keep her away from people, right? And like going back to when I went with when I took my mom, my aunt, and my grandmother to the rehab hospital that my grandfather was at in Greenwood, we went to a late lunch on the way back home. Excuse me. And on the way, on the way back to the car, okay. So where I parked, there weren't handicapped slots close to the door, but there was this one spot right next to the little thing with the trees and grass. But so there was a little bit of a step. There was plenty of space where she did not have to go up on the step. until she was going to the sidewalk, right? So it was like closest to the door that wasn't a handicap slot since those were full. On the way back to the car, I was walking on this little median thing, or on the curb, and she was, she had stepped down and was walking right next to the car, which is where she should have been. Since I was on the curb, because I was trying to be close enough that I could catch her if need be, kind of a thing. But then she's like, well, why am I down here? And she decides to turn and try to step up on the curb. It's like, you're down there because you don't need to be up here. And she ended up falling, right? And it was this whole ass ordeal. And like my mom and like her sister trying to help lift my grandmother. And, like my mom's in the way so I can't get into a better spot and all this stuff. It's like, what the fuck? It's like freaking untrained circus kind of a thing. Anyway, there was a guy that got there that was restaurant staff, and I think he was getting ready to start his shift. He got there and basically pushed my mom out of the way and helped me get my grandmother up. Like, he didn't ask. Like, everybody that asked, they're like, no, we got this. But the one that didn't ask and just pushed my mom out of the way and helped, it was like, God, thank God, right? Because this is like, they're rejecting all the help or all the potential help because they're trying to prove that we got it somehow. It's like, fuck this bullshit, y'all. But yeah, it's like that, because there I was, then I get pulled into their chaos even more. And it's like, anytime I have been around my grandmother, it is guaranteed she is going to fall like in the next 12 hours. And I'm going to get called to go over there. However, since I've been disconnected, they're way less likely to do that. So now they got to figure it out themselves. And yeah, it's just irritating. But it's like the illusion of we got this all handled or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't. And quite frankly, it's like, I think, okay, as I started setting boundaries, which there again, because of the whole twin flame thing, it's like that started being brought up to my attention over and over again that I needed to work on my boundaries. And like one way that showed up was, okay, various cards that I've pulled in that time, or when I started taking classes in Inner Path, like Lenita was talking about, one of the first things she does with new students is check in with their guides to see what specifically they need to work on. And she said, my biggest thing was I needed to work on boundaries and shielding and protecting my energy. Well, then as I started doing that, she realized, oh, my family is what I'm protecting myself from. And as I started protecting myself from them, then I started realizing how really incredibly fucked up everything is, right? So then it's like, when I started this, I wouldn't even tell my brother about it. And like, he's been my biggest ally throughout my entire life. But I knew that where he was when I was starting out, like with the YouTube channel, it's like I couldn't tell him about what I was doing because I knew if he found out that it was in any way speaking out against like the bullshit with our family, then he'd shift into his role as the flying monkey and, say something to our parents, and then it would like they'd rain down on me or whatever, right? So for a long time, I didn't say anything to him about what I was doing on that end, but I did start pointing out things that I was noticing as I started setting boundaries. And as I started setting boundaries, I started like, I'd give him like some rocks to help with boundaries for himself, and like one of the big things, like I talked about, one morning I was waking up and it's like, as I was waking up, it was like somebody whispered in my ear, Mookaite Jasper. I was like, okay, obviously, since that's the first thing I hear as I'm waking up, that must be important. So I did end up, that's one of them. Yeah, that's my Mookaite heart. Got off Etsy. But since that was what I heard, it's like, obviously that one's important. So I found that one on Etsy, but I went to Inner Path, Pyramid of Enlightenment, one of those two, and like I started buying things, right? Right? And I got a few things off Etsy, obviously, the necklace, and then I got these palm stones. And there was a red one and a yellow one, but both Mookaite. And at one point, I got them out, and it was like, I think this will help you. And I said, take a pick. Which one do you want? And I think my brother took the red one. And then I ended up giving the yellow one to a friend, temporary friend, to try to help with their situations, right? But it's like, when I looked up what Mookaite was for, like one of the first things that came up on the screen was something about helping to break intergenerational trauma or something with that. But since it was family lineage stuff, it's like, okay, so I got my brother this, and like as I feel, or as I find something is useful for me, and then, kind of share it with him. He's got a nice collection of bracelets and rocks that he keeps now too. And he started really seeing some of the same stuff that I was pointing out, right? And then I even told him a while back, I think in the past couple of months, he started talking about like the stuff he was noticing with our mom. And I said, part of that's my fault. And he's like, what? And I said, Mookaite jasper that's one of the things it's good for, is helping to, disconnect from like the family stuff that you're so stuck in that you don't even see it. But then, trying to, let alone that you need to heal from it, right? And he said, well, thank you for that. Because of course now he notices it with mom anyway. He hasn't had the same relationship with our dad, but I think a lot of that is the misogynistic side of things. And since he was at least the male, he was more acceptable on a lot of ends than I had been. So it's like where my dad's been good to him, it's been much more of a dick to me. Will you stop digging the carpet, dude? Yeah. Clearly the answer is no, she won't. Hey. She's like, oh, you giving attention? Let me come back. She had just gone over to lay down by the other wall. But yeah. I don't know if there's anything else I was trying to talk about on that. I feel like I'm pushing an hour and a half. There again, it's like that goes back to that, that piece where, yeah, it's a whole lot of rambling throughout the whole entire video. And if somebody can't stick around to the end because they get bored, that's not a bad thing for me. To me, that is perfectly acceptable. This, like, when I can start actually opening up more and sharing more of me, then, if other people have fallen off by that point, I count that as a win. So even though, people say shitty things and try to make you feel bad, try to knock you down a peg, it's like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, even if it doesn't look, it's definitely all over the place, but there's a method to the madness. And if you choose to write it out, then you might figure that out. If you don't, oh well. But even this, it's like being able to take my time to warm up in this space, Like I find myself commenting more on posts on Instagram and like going more to the side that's going to piss people off. So yeah, it's like my Instagram stuff's still locked down at this point in time. And I've talked a lot about how I will open it up at some point, but I'm just not there yet. And mainly for this purpose, right? Keep some kind of disconnect. So when I say things that's going to piss somebody off in that space, because I commented on something, like the one I commented earlier, it was on that BERECKER page. He had something talking about the Christians that seem really gung-ho for the idea of World War III. And, he's kind of giving some thoughts on that whole space. And one of the things he said was, talking about how Revelations wasn't meant to be taken as a literal thing. But then there's a lot of people that have this idea of this Antichrist figure, right? And he made a comment about, although our president kind of sounds like, or kind of fits the bill. And I commented on something that had to do with that, which is, of course, the biggest part of my YouTube channel is me navigating through the stuff and figuring out what it is that I do believe on a lot of things, and basically organizing my thoughts and clearing out the junk, right? But you gotta clear out the junk to really start understanding the stuff that I do believe and that I do, I guess, want to stand for, right? And I was thinking the other day, it's like, I'm not going to say that I agree with everything that I've said in previous videos. A lot of times there is a lot of it is the junk that I have to clear out of my system, basically set it down, unpack it, figure out if there's anything worth keeping or not, and then moving on to the next thing, right? But it's like the biggest thing that I do agree with is that piece that I've mentioned many times with basically the mainstream Christian religion is the very Antichrist that they're preaching against, or like they're so terrified of, right? And it's like, it goes back to the narcissistic abuse piece, because the church is very much perpetuating an abusive system, right? So, I've talked about how my mom goes from 1 minute playing the victim, and if that doesn't get the response from you that she wants, then it's like she spins and like she becomes like the terrorist, and like she's like becomes this like nightmare to deal with, and like she's out to mainly get me in this this whole situation. But she's done it to my brother too, but he was just more likely to go along with, she played on his compassion is the biggest thing, but it's like that flip, it leaves the rest of us torn, trying to wonder. It's like, wait a second, but we know them as, they were playing this victim role, but then when we stopped catering to giving them the energy they're wanting as the victim, then they become this terrorist where, you're like the enemy because you don't see things their way, right? So it's like, the Richard Grannon was the one that talked about that split. He said, they're not split. This way wasn't working, so they shifted to this way to try to get their supply that way. And it's like you become split because you've seen them as this in this one role, but then when you stopped going along with that, then they shifted to this other role to try to get their supply that way. It's like that's basically what the church is creating, is a system where that's the biggest thing. There's a whole lot of people that are playing the victim because Jesus was, they didn't like Jesus, so they abused him and treated him terribly and blah blah blah. So we as Christians are just expected to take this on, and we're supposed to fit in this bill too, right? And it's like, But then when you realize all the things they're actually doing, it's like most of the time there's a fucking terrorist for the rest of the people that, that Jesus actually supported, the marginalized types, where, the ones that they're speaking against because, because that's how it works. When their villain or when their victim role stops getting them the attention that they feel they are warranted, then they shift over into this other role. It's like, but people actually in the system don't even realize they're doing it, and, of course, with the narcissistic abuse, it's like there are so many people acting as like the flying monkeys because they're still giving the supply to the narcissist and catering to the bad belief system and all that shit. Like my mom's friend who got after me about when I got after my mom about getting Gracie all this cereal, when he had said, stop getting her cereal. And then within a month of my sister-in-law being gone, there's 4 bags of cereal in there. And, my mom was trying to give her another bag. And I said, except your son has asked you to stop doing that. So then the friend chimes in with, oh, it's a grandma thing and all grandmas do it and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that is why it's a problem, because you're crossing a boundary. They asked you not to do something and you're going to continue doing it anyway because you're the grandma and you don't think it applies to you. So, yeah. It's like that family friend. It's like I kind of, there's a level where I almost feel bad about not wanting anything to do with her. But then there's that shit that she does that I don't feel bad about. And, I'm kind of biding my time at this point, and as soon as I get away from these people, I'm gonna have to cut the whole thing because it's all toxic. And that was her participating, her being one of my mom's flying monkeys, and that I'm supposed to yield even though I'm trying to help my brother out when he's trying to have a boundary, because my mom won't listen to it because she's a grandma and she doesn't have to. No, that's not what that's saying. That's just saying you disrespect boundaries and you don't think they apply to you, which is a big problem in the world right now, right? So, yeah. And that friend, she reached out to me one night trying to get information about my brother. Or talking about them moving and how sad she was for my mom and all this stuff. And I just said, she'll be fine. And that was the end of the conversation. It's like, yeah, she'll be fine. It's like my brother and sister-in-law need to get the kid away from her grandmother so they can have a chance raising her as they want to without my mom meddling in the middle of it. But that meddling grandmother trying to bring everything down for everybody else. So many things. So many layers to this. But anyway, since I'm at an hour and a half, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, I appreciate you. Until the next time, see ya.